some sense out of this. How we doing there, boys and girls? Manthieus here, and welcome back to another video. And for some of you, long time no see. We'll be back to our regular schedule before long, but I got a topic of conversation for today that's been floating around. Many content creators have chipped in on this, and I want to really try and break it down in a bit of detail and put some clarity to it. It's one thing that I like to do here on the channel, is to get these discussion points on the go. I went as far as yesterday asking on both my Twitter and my Discord. Now, I know I don't have the largest of communities, yet I was able to get some responses back just to how people feel time gating is kind of affecting their play of the game. So I made some notes. We went to the old notepad, we jotted a few things down, we put our thoughts in order, and I wanted to try and discuss it with you guys today in hopefully a constructive manner, as I see a lot of conflicting, not only information, but also points of view when it comes to time gating. Not just in World of Warcraft, but in the video game industry, you know, as a whole. So let's bring up the notepad first and foremost. Let's see what we're dealing with here. So I thought I'd go, you know, I'd go with the discussion point of, do we feel that Blizzard is overusing time gating? And I very quickly realised that if we're going to talk about this in any sort of logical fashion, we should probably define what we mean by time gating to begin with. Now, a lot of this is going to fall on what is my own opinion, although I try to ground my opinions in as much like fact as possible. Obviously, if you share a different opinion to this, you're completely entitled to do so, and I encourage you to drop your comments down below, and so we can get some proactive discussion going about this. But what do we mean for the most part when we say time gating? Well, I've defined it as a limitation from being able to play an aspect of the game for a set duration of time. This is a limitation that is defined by the developer. They chose to implement it into the game. Not only did they choose to implement it into the game, they also decided how much of a wait there is going to be before you can continue on with that content. And in many cases, not so much in the World of Warcraft, but in many other scenarios outside of WoW where we see time gating, that often becomes a way to skip the delay, the wait that is needed, and in many cases this is often by taking a wallet out and paying for it. Like I said, not so much a thing in World of Warcraft, luckily, but that's not to say that time gating doesn't exist in WoW. What are the uses for time gating though? Well, there is a reason why they put time gating into the game. Developers do it for a reason. If there wasn't a reason to do it, they wouldn't be doing it. So there's got to be a reason for it. And why do we think that that is? Well, I generally tend to go by the fact that time gating becomes a way for them to extend what I've defined as the life of a game by introducing these waiting periods. From a developer's perspective, this can also be used to increase engagement with either the game itself as a whole or certain areas of that game in particular. We see that World of Warcraft is such a big game nowadays that they feel it almost necessary to put bits of time gating on many different pieces of content. It's not that, you know, you don't log into WoW, play for 20 minutes and then a pop-up comes up saying, right, you've played enough for today, go away, do something else. They have to break it down into the different content areas. But the big question, why do they use time gating? Why are the Blizzard developers feeling the need to implement time gating? And what is the main #1 use for time gating in a video game? Well, the big reason, one that we see mostly outside of the World of Warcraft, for, you know, your mobile games and that sort of stuff, your free-to-play games, is it's an incredibly powerful tool to promote monetization in your games. Or promote microtransactions in the games. Mostly we'll see this in free-to-play games. You get given the game for free, you can play it for free, but if you wish to play it for any more than, I don't know, half an hour at a time, You know, if you want to continue having that fun, that'll be $1, please. And they drip feed the monetization into the game in that sort of fashion. That's a very common way to which we will see time gating used in video games. Like I said, not so much in World of Warcraft, luckily, but they definitely have their monetization on point in the first place. We'll discuss that a little bit more coming up anyway. Another big reason, and I think the main reason why time gating in itself is utilized heavily in World of Warcraft, is for this one simple reason: that the actual content in itself is not sufficient enough to engage a player for the desired amount of time. Now, the desired amount of time is set by the developers themselves. You know, Blizzard charges a monthly subscription fee. By charging us a monthly subscription fee, they feel it, you know, justifiable on themselves to try and provide us with an entire month's worth of content. At least should hope that that's what they're trying to do. Now, the problem is if, let's say, for example, the campaign, they give you the campaign all in one go, and you bang out the campaign and it takes you 8 hours to do, and you get that done on the first day, well then what are you going to do for the rest of the month? This is where developers will start to utilize things like what we're going to talk about in a little bit, content release schedules, but they also look to use time gating. If the amount of gameplay isn't sufficient to keep you activated and keep you interested and keep you having fun, or more importantly, if the reward structure's not there, or it's just not exciting to go and do, they often will turn to, you know, systems such as time gating to delay your progress so that it feels like you've constantly got something to do. And this leads me to talk about the subtle differences I see between a content release schedule and time gating. These are two pieces of terminology that are very similar, but they're not exactly the same, and they definitely have their own pros and cons. We see this quite frequently. Things like the campaign progress, for example. The campaign is a really good example of having a content release schedule. It's not strictly time gating, although it very, very frequently gets referred to as being time gated. The campaign is not, by our definition at least, truly time gating. It's a content release schedule. Once a week, there is a bunch of new quests for you to go out and complete. From a development point of view, they make these campaign quests in bulk. They spend a lot of time making all of these, and if they give you them all in one go, then yes, you are probably going to zerg through it in 8 hours. Job done. I'm done. See you later. I'm off. You know. So instead, they choose to, you know, chop it up, and they give you some of the quests of that campaign week on week. Now, the difference here is that those quests and the campaign is different every time. It is truly unique content in itself. You know, one chapter of the campaign is fundamentally very different from the next chapter of the campaign. So it's smart business practice in that regard. They make a bunch of quests, they make a bunch of activities to do, and they give you some to do week on week on week, and that helps, you know, justify and pad out the monthly subscription. So yeah, bulk creation of content, which is then drip fed to the player base week on week, often related to each other. You know, it's a story, it tells a story eventually, but each individual set of quests is actually unique in its own right. Time gating, on the other hand, is something similar but slightly different. Time gating is usually utilized when they give you a big thing to do, one big thing to do. In World of Warcraft, we see this most frequently being things like reputation grinds. You're introduced to the faction, you get to see the rewards that are available from that faction, but you can only do so much in any given time to build your reputation with that faction. This is one of the most frequently used aspects of time gating in World of Warcraft, and one currently as the Enlightened Reputation is concerned, is one of the most, up for discussion currently. And I would like to point out that it's arbitrarily delaying your progress. There's nothing to say that you couldn't constantly go out through Zereth Mortis. You couldn't continuously kill rares. You could continuously kill mobs. You could farm up items. There are many different ways that they could make it so that you could continuously chip away and work on this reputation. But instead, they have chosen to put sort of hard limitations in place. You can get X amount of reputation on this day, then you have to stop, and then you have to come back the next day to continue your progress. This is what many people seem to have an issue with. Content release schedule, it's a smart way of doing business. It's unique every time. People don't mind it anywhere near as much. From a game development point of view, I'd much rather this be the case than the time gating itself. What I wanted to do though, in a little bit of detail, just to try and emphasize my point here of to why there is just maybe, I'm very strongly of the opinion that there is just too much time gating in the game at this point. I wanted to take a little look at the patch 9.2, the major features that we're going to be seeing in patch 9.2, and look at them from the perspective of, are they time gated? Is there no time gating? Is there no restrictions on it? Is it what we've looked at here as to be a content release schedule sort of situation here? What actually are we dealing with here? Maybe we should make this just a little bit bigger so we can see more of it in one go here. So the major 9.2 features. So let's start at the top and work our way through it. The new zone, Zereth Mortis, which you can kind of see a little bit in the background over here. The new zone of Zereth Mortis. You get access to Zereth Mortis day one. Patch goes live, boom, you can work your way out into Zereth Mortis very quickly. But this little creature, the Poco Pock, I think is his actual name. I call him Coco Pops because it's easier to remember, and more importantly, it's easier to say. He, though, has an energy bar. Yes, he has an energy bar attached to him. He is required to interact with things out in Zereth Mortis, but he has an energy bar. He starts off with 10 energy, and when you do something with him, when you tell him to interact with a thing in Zereth Mortis, he loses energy, and it takes time for him to recuperate his energy. So in that regard, it's a softer approach, but you are being time gated with your progress in the zone. If you spend too much time in Zereth Mortis and you try to do too many things in Zereth Mortis, you're going to realise that your Coco Pops dude is ran out of energy and you have no other choice but to wait for his energy to come back. Not great. Flying in the new zone. This is one that I'm quite passionate about personally, but flying is time gated again. Time gated in its fullest of forms. Primarily flying comes from, there's an achievement for flying that you need to acquire to unlock flying in Zereth Mortis. You can do most of it day one. Most of the sub requirements of this achievement are things like collecting some rares, killing some rares, sorry, collecting some treasures. But there is one aspect of it. It's linked also to your progress with the campaign in patch 9.2. Which means that you're not going to be able to fully complete that achievement and unlock flying until I believe the 3rd or 4th week. So it's being time gated from you. Here's a thing you can work on, but oh, hang on, stop, you've done too much. You have to wait to be able to complete this now. We have the new zone reputation, or the zone reputation specifically. The Cipher System is what it's often being referred to. This is horrendously time gated. You have to not only farm currency to be able to click buttons on a research tree for the Cipher System, but then when you click that button, you have an arbitrarily large amount of time that you have to just wait before you get the reward. There's no real justification or reason for waiting for this other than they're trying to stretch out the amount of time it takes you to do this content. Heavily time gated. The new reputation, the one that's the big one, the big talking point as it stands at the moment, the Enlightened Reputation, the one that many people are interested in for the very simple reason that it holds a lot of the big rewards. crafted, you know, the profession guys out there are really interested in this because 2 of the big new crafting recipes come from this reputation. Raiders, PvPers, Mythic Plus people are all interested in this because it has the unlock for the memory for the new the memory of Unity, which is basically the way to make your second legendary become account wide. That's locked behind this reputation, and as it stands at the moment, based on your ability to gain the reputation, it's going to take somewhere in the region of give or take 55 days worth of play before you're able to reach Exalted with these guys. True definition of time gating here. You can do so much each and every day, but once you hit that limit, you have to stop. No amount of free time on your behalf is going to allow you to progress any faster than Blizzard choose to let you progress with this. Let's move on though. Let's look at the raid. The new raid, the one that people are very, you know, people are aware of how the raids work. It's worked in a very similar fashion. This is, you know, this is a little bit more 50-50. This is more open to opinion to whether is it truly time gated or is it more like a content release schedule situation. The lines are a little bit blurry on this, dependent on whether you consider killing the same boss but just on a different difficulty new content or not. Arguably, we get the easier versions of the raids to begin with. Heroic and normal mode we get relatively quickly. A week later, once we've progressed through that a little bit, we'll have access to go and kill those, or attempt to kill those bosses at least on a higher mythic difficulty. And at that same point, the casual friendly, the LFR mode will also open. And in that scenario, weirdly, I've always thought this to be the weirdest situation. The easiest, the tourist mode, the most casual friendly, however, whichever derogatory term you want to use for LFR, is the mode that is the most drip fed to you. You get 1 or 2 or 3 bosses each and every week, and they drip feed them to you. I've never understood why they do that. It's the easiest mode. What's the point? Just give it to people. Either way, it's another example of, you know, of time gating in use. The campaign, the new campaign in patch 9.2, we've spoke about the campaign a little bit. The campaign is more of a content release schedule system. You get the first 3 chapters in the very first week, so you've got plenty to do when you first get into it. Then you'll get 1 additional block of quests from then on out. I don't really have any issues with that. The only issue I tend to have with the campaign being on a content release schedule is the fact that the campaign itself also then holds a lot of the rewards that people are looking for, and more importantly the big patch features, which we'll talk about now. Unlocking your second legendary, that is time gated. It's time gated because you physically cannot get access to your second legendary until you have completed a section of the campaign. No matter what you do in the game, you do not have the ability to get that second legendary until you complete that. The memory of Unity is in a similar nature to this. It's time gated on the premise that you have to be revered before you can have access to the memory of Unity. Revered with a faction that, as we've already spoke about, is heavily time gated. The new profession items, let's blast through these a little bit faster now. The new profession items, these are time gated. They're rep required. They've got rep requirements to them. They're locked behind the campaign progress. You have your professions now, you can craft some stuff, but the majority of the stuff that people want, they're going to halt your progress with your professions and say, right, come back next week and you'll get the good stuff. The new crafted pets and mount system. This is actually looking quite good, but in true Blizzard fashion, they've chosen to time gate our ability to progress with this. We can start... The crafted pets and mounts system is also linked to the Cipher system. You have to unlock it, which, as we've also said, has long research times, to the point where it's going to take you 5 days to be able to unlock the ability to make the pets, and it's going to take 11 days for you to be able to access and craft the mounts. Now, the reason it's a time gated system rather than a content release schedule is simply the fact that you can start collecting items and working towards this way before you actually have access to it, which is really annoying. It's like, oh, here's a bunch of things, you can't do anything with them yet, you have to wait. You have to farm an item, press a button and wait. There's just so much emphasis on just waiting for stuff to happen. The last one, Torghast. I've not tested Torghast all that much in patch 9.2, but as far as I'm aware, this is one of the only features that's not actually time gated. But like I said, I've not tested it much. It might be. Question marks on that one. I'm not entirely sure. And unfortunately, in this patch, there's no new dungeon, but we would like to have hopefully seen a new dungeon. But I hope this really goes to emphasize just how much time gating is actually used in the game. And if they were, in theory, let's just hypothetically think for a minute, if they were to take away all of the time gating, or maybe not all of it, but most of it, there's a lot of stuff to do. I can't argue that there's lots of stuff to do here. There's plenty enough stuff here to easily keep somebody busy for a good few weeks. And we've not even really spoke about the whole Mythic Plus side of the game, the PvP side of the game. There's other aspects of this that, by and large, there's a reasonable amount to do. But the problem is they still feel the need to, you know, chunk it down into small pieces and delay your ability to progress with it, which I think at this point it's getting to be a little bit too much. So with that said, then there are a couple of, I wanted to try and just pinpoint down some of the argued pros and cons for time gating. I'm sure by now you're very well aware of my sort of opinion on this, but I wanted to jump in with some of the pros and cons that other people tend to have with this and just talk about them for a second. So one of the pros, or you know, one of the benefits that people tend to see of having time gating in the game is it hard caps players. Usually in this regard, they're referring to other players rather than themselves. It limits players from being able to, quote-unquote, complete everything day one. This is one of those scenarios that, as we said, there's actually a lot to do. It's not really feasible for somebody, if they had full access to all of this from day one, to actually be able to do everything. The likelihood of people doing this is very slim. Now, it's a different story when you're dealing with a competitive game. And World of Warcraft, like it or not, is quite a competitive game. People are always competing against each other. It's, by virtue of an MMO, relatively competitive. People want to be able to do those bigger and better keys in Mythic Plus. They want to, you know, get higher ratings in PvP. They want to defeat harder bosses and get better gear in the raid. It's a quite competitive game. And in a competitive environment, hey, it's, you know, it's all fair game as far as I'm concerned. People should be allowed to, if they wish, to go hardcore in any given direction they choose. You know, do derogatory things to get derogatory results. You know, if people want to complete the game in one day, then that's kind of up to them. I'm of the opinion. I know that could almost be an entire video in itself, but I tend to think that implementing time gating to prevent other players from doing what they want to do is not really a good justification as far as I'm concerned. One of the other pros to time gating is that it extends the life of each content patch. This is where there's some subtle nuance here. If it was to help spread out the content so that there is always something to do, it's a lot more justified to have it in. But we still find that we have a massive problem in World of Warcraft currently, of that even with all of this time gating, we still feel the need to roll multiple ults to keep ourselves busy in between patches. There's not actually, even with all this time gating in place, there's not actually enough content to spread 8 months between patches like we're getting now. And I think one of the biggest problems that we see with that is the fact that the Blizzard devs have to spend just so much time developing these systems, this content in the first place. On top of developing the system, though, they then have to implement, test, reconfigure any form of time gating that they attach to it. And the worst thing is that's still not their job done. They then still, on every single piece of content they produce, have to then implement some sort of catch-up system. It almost triples the work that these developers have to do. If there was no time gating to begin with, there wouldn't be any need for quite as many. Catch-up systems would still have their place, sure, but they wouldn't need to be as frequently needed as we see them right now. It's almost as if it's triple the work to produce every single piece of content. Now, like I said, if it's used in a fashion to make it so that each and every week of each and every month there's something new to do, I'm a little bit more on board with it. But even with all this time gating in place, we still tend to find that there's usually a month or two's worth of fun new stuff to do in a patch. And then we go into downtime mode. We go into a period of time where unless you're rolling alts and unless you're trying to find extra things to do in the game, there really isn't anything new to do for huge chunks of time. And that only makes the time gating feel even worse, in my opinion. They, believe it or not, were some of the pros to time gating. What I would want to do now is just quickly highlight some of the very obvious cons in my mind of time gating. It's super restrictive for the majority of the player base. There are aspects of this game that people love and people want to play more of, but they get to a point where they hit that brick wall and they can't do any more of what they want to do. That feels really weird in a game that we have not only paid a box price for, but we also pay a monthly subscription to play. They are two scenarios where you'd absolutely expect people to play the game as much as they feel that they would like to. And the elements of time gating in the game literally stop people in their tracks from being able to progress. If I want to, you know, grind out the new zone and do nothing but play in the new zone and work my way through the zone, collecting all the treasures, killing all of the rares, doing all of the daily quests, grinding all the reputation, if that's an avenue of the game that I enjoy, for the love of, let me do that. The time gating tends to make it so that you end up with like a chore list. This is one that we're going to talk about in a minute, but it creates this task list, this chore list, this to-do list, this job list. Torghast is the best example of this. Torghast is a fantastic piece of content in and of itself, but with one crucial problem. They made it mandatory to do every single week. And because of that, it was very easy to overlook the fun that you could have in there, because you very quickly came to realize that you weren't doing it because you wanted to go and do it. You weren't doing it because it was fun. You were doing it because you felt you had to keep up. And that was because of the time gating aspect attached around the acquisition of, at the time, what was Soul Ash. You had to do your Torghast every single week to keep up with the requirements for Torghast to maintain your position in that competitive area of the game, which ultimately had nothing to do with Torghast itself. They were two systems that didn't necessarily need to be linked together, but because they were, because people's desire to be competitive overrode their desire to just play Torghast, it turned Torghast into Choregast, and I think is ultimately very, very disappointing. And if I was the developers that had created Torghast, I'd be very sad to see it the way that most people view it now, unfortunately. One of the big downsides is the promotion of constant daily logins and daily play. This is a really weird situation for me to see in a game that, like we said, we pay a box price, we pay a subscription for. Look at Netflix. I'm gonna make a parallel to another industry. Look at the film industry. Netflix allows you to pay a monthly subscription so that you firstly can binge watch whatever you want whenever you want during that subscription period, and so that you are not bombarded with adverts in between the programs. Adverts are the film industry's and the TV's industry's time gating mechanism. You're watching a program on the telly for free. Every 20 minutes they're going to go, stop. You've got to watch 4 minutes of ads now before you can continue watching the program. That is time gating in the TV industry, the movie industry. Netflix comes along and they says, right, pay a monthly subscription. You can binge watch what you want. And guess what? Netflix, last time I checked, pretty successful company. We don't need to see this much time gating in a game that we pay monthly for, Blizzard. That's basically what I'm trying to say here. Next point is one that we kind of alluded to a little bit already, is the fact that I'm of the opinion that the amount of time gating and catch-up systems that the developers have to work on, and not only work on, but tweak and fine-tune and test and reiterate upon, has to, in some way, shape or form, take away from the amount of actual new, unique content that they could be producing. Now, I know development teams of games this large are just that. They're teams of people. They're all working on different things. But any time that is taken by out of a developer's day to work on a time gating system or a catch-up system is time that they are not working on creating something new and unique and interesting for the player base, and more importantly, fun. We talked about the implications of creating chores and task lists, which are not fun. There's a railroad effect with time gating. You feel as if you're playing the game on rails because you don't have the ability, like we mentioned earlier, you don't tend to have the ability to focus on the aspect of the game that you enjoy most, because to be able to do that, you very quickly feel as if you have to also engage with X, Y, and Z components of the game. And it means that you tend to have this kind of linear progression path, which doesn't look linear. It doesn't look linear to begin with, but it's actually incredibly linear. You have to go here, do this. Once you've done that thing, you then have to go over there and do the other thing before you can ultimately get to the end goal. You're snaking your way there, but the progression path is very, very predetermined with all this time gating in place. Instead of just going, here's an open world experience with plenty of things to do, you choose what you do and in which order you do it. Eventually players will get to the same point, but I guarantee you, if you give people the content to play and allow them to pick and choose the route that they take, yes, they'll ultimately end up at the exact same point that Blizzard have very carefully created, but they'll enjoy themselves 10 times more whilst they do it, rather than being told that, right, you have to go and get your weeklies done to keep up with your reputation, then you have to go into Torghast and get X, Y, and Z currency, so that then after you've completed the campaign, you can then get, you know, the item that you want. People want to play games the way they want to play games. If, you know, Netflix doesn't necessarily, although they might promote different things to you, they don't say that you have to watch 20 minutes of Breaking Bad before you can watch the series that you really want to watch. It just doesn't make sense. And the last one, I'll leave this and I will make this the last one because I'm very aware that this video is ending up being a little bit longer than I expected. The worst thing is it tends to extend the price that you have to pay to enjoy this game. You may have noticed a few times during this video I've touched on the monetization aspect. Blizzard are already triple dipping us for monetization in the game. They are less gross about it than some other game developers out there for sure, but we do pay, we buy the game to begin with. We then pay monthly to play the game, and we are also heavily incentivized to interact with the in-game store at the very same time. They are already monetizing us from every single aspect. When we have certain pieces of content such as, you know, this extended amount of playtime to reach a point of achievement, to be able to hit Exalted with the new reputation, you physically cannot do it without subscribing for at least 2 calendar months in this game. This means that if you want to be Exalted, there's a price you have to pay to be Exalted, even if you go hardcore and play the game as much as you want. I don't feel that when you pay a box price for a game and you pay a monthly subscription for it, there should be systems in place that take over a single calendar month for you to feasibly achieve. It feels like you're being nickeled and dimed. And I fully understand why some people look at it when it comes to renew their subscription and go, you know what, it's not for me. I'm kind of fortunate. I've not paid a penny for this game in years, primarily because I pay for the game with gold. Because one of the big aspects of this game that I've really enjoyed over the years is gold making. Regulars to my channel will fully understand this. But I tend to take a lot of enjoyment from leveling up the professions, crafting items, selling them to players, gathering, you know, materials and all that side of stuff. It's ironically an aspect of the game that is far, far less time gated than any other piece of content in the game. Probably why I've naturally drifted towards it over the years. But because of that, I don't actually have to pay for the game. I convert my gold to tokens every month and I pay for my game that way. But for those that actually take their credit card out their pocket and they ask themselves the question of, is it worth it to me to resubscribe for another month, knowing that there's only X amount of content I can do every day? I fully understand why many, many people choose to not subscribe. And the worst thing about it is that they leave with a bad taste in their mouth. And I think this is the biggest problem. It's time gating ultimately results in a short-term gain for Blizzard. Sure, you might get that second month sub out of people, but ultimately, when they do choose to unsubscribe after that second month, you've potentially lost them forever. If you let me go ham and you let me play the game to the fullest of that the game has got to offer, on my terms, as and when, you know, as and when I want to, I might burn out. It's absolutely true. There's a very strong likelihood, because of I am quite competitive and I equally get super engrossed in a video game. When that happens, I'll play it to an excess. I'll play it to an excess and then I'll stop playing the game. But guess what? A couple of months down the line, I'll get that itch again. I'll get that need to go back and play it again. Why? Because it was really, really fun. Time gating, I think my final conclusion of this for you guys, boys and girls, is this. Time gating directly removes huge amounts of fun from the game. And I really don't feel that it is justified in quite as heavy-handedness that they're using it right now. I'm not saying all time gating needs to be removed completely. There are some subtle ways that you can use it for the good of the game, such as, you know, drip feeding new chapters of the campaign. That's fine. That does promote continued engagement with the game over time. And let me tell you, if it's fun enough, I won't even be thinking about this. If the game is plenty fun enough, I don't care what systems or mechanics are in there. I'll do it because it's fun. If you get it to that point, problems are solved. Everything's gone. Do all the gross stuff you need to if the game is super duper mega fun. But I will leave it there for this one, boys and girls. I know this video has gone on a lot longer than I actually initially expected it to. That's the nature of a discussion, you know. It sometimes takes a little bit of time to fully articulate the way that we feel about something. If you share similar opinions to me, let me know in the comments down below. If you think I'm a moron and completely disagree with me, let me know in the comments down below. I'd be interested to hear what you think about it. If you enjoy this style of video though, boys and girls, make sure you at least give the video a like. Subscribe if you're new around here and wish for more content of this nature. But I, guys, have been Manthieus. Thanks for listening today, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.